Hi, I'm Kaden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have Callan and I's final mock drafts before the 2025 NFL draft, which, of course, as we've mentioned before, will be in Green Bay, and Callan and I will be at. So this will be our final episode before the draft. We won't have any sort of kind of live reaction like we usually do with the draft because that'd be pretty difficult in a giant crowd of people. But nonetheless, very excited for this episode in general. Just a quick heads up. I mean, you'll kind of know regardless once we get to the drafts. But I'm thinking no face cam while we're talking about them, these mock drafts here. So if there's no face cam, that's why. It's just kind of hard to fit it in without blocking some of the picks. But since there's no really huge news right now, we will just kind of get rolling straight into this mock draft, and we're going to start with Callan's. So here is Callan's on screen now. Callan, what are some of the big things that you kind of wanted to point out in your mock draft?
Well, one of the big things right away you probably noticed is number one overall, I am different. I got Abdul Carter going first. I explained this, when we did our live mock draft a couple weeks ago. I liked Abdul Carter going first here. I think he's the best player overall in this draft, at least on the defensive side. You could make an argument for Travis Hunter, but I think that as far as pure football player, defensive mastermind, Abdul Carter is going to be the top pick, or should be the top pick in my eyes, and let Will Levis have another chance and see what he can do in his second year in this offense where he's not going back and forth between coaches and offensive coordinators. So I know it's not likely to happen, but I think it'd be interesting if it did.
I really like Will Levis. I've always been on the Levis train. And I think I've said this before, so I won't dive too deep into it. If Will Levis was part of the Callahan regime, I'm 100% in. I totally agree with this. But since he's a past regime guy, a new head coach, especially an offensive-minded head coach, always wants to go get his new quarterback to run the offense. I just don't see the Carter pick happening. I don't think it's the end of the world if it happens. I think giving Will Levis another chance isn't terrible. Maybe waiting for next year for a guy like Arch Manning or XYZ, whoever steps up big in the college football season next year, isn't a terrible choice. But for now, I think you just go grab a guy like Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, he goes second overall to the Browns, so he is definitely the top quarterback, I think, available. But, I think that in this early in this mock draft, I think this is how it should go, but it probably won't. But then moving on, another big thing I wanted to point out is I have the 3 running backs going in the first round, including Caleb Johnson over Omari and Hampton, which we did in our first Brawley mock draft. So I again have that because I wanted to double down on that since I've picked it once. And the fact that I think that I've said this before, need will fit the draft position here and the draft pick. So I think that they have to go out and get running backs, these 3 teams that draft running backs, because they don't really have any. And they need to have someone in there. And I think they panic and they go running back quickly because Genetti goes 6 overall. And then the Cowboys, I think, will surprise people and select Caleb Johnson. And a lot of mock drafts have had Omari and Hampton to the Broncos. He's been linked there already. So I think it's likely that at least 2 of these go. I know Caleb Johnson's kind of the reach, but it's a bit of a homer pick. And, hey, the last draft we were at in Kansas City, the surprise Iowa pick went early in the first round to Detroit. So you never know. It could happen again.
Yeah, not only a surprise early Iowa pick, but a surprise early running back pick by that same team,
That's
the Detroit
true.
Lions, ironically also at pick 12.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of guys, or a lot of people and analysts kind of thought Jahmyr Gibbs was going to fall out of the first round. And all of a sudden, boom, he was taken at 12, and he's just been an absolute unit in the NFL so far. I, of course, love Caleb Johnson as well, also being an Iowa Hawkeye fan. That man is a one-man offense. There's no doubt about it. He was Iowa's entire offense. If it wasn't for Ashton Jeanty having the season he did, Caleb Johnson would be very much looked at as a first-round pick because of what he was able to do single-handedly there in Iowa for that offense. I think just because of how the draft board falls for all these other teams and kind of how Caleb Johnson has been scouted and looked at so far, maybe like move back or take something else at 12 and move up in the second round and grab Caleb Johnson just to make sure you get your guy. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just gotta get your guy. You get your guy however you get your guy. The Lions did it just like you mentioned with both Jack Campbell at linebacker and Jahmyr Gibbs last year, two years ago now in Kansas City. And both of them were absolute home runs. They're both some of the top position players at their league right now, or in the league right now. So it's just sometimes you go get your guy. Maybe it's a little early here. I think it's a little early, but we shall see. It'd be a really freaking cool one for you to predict.
It would be. Sweet, yeah. And another, moving on to another big one that I'm going to try to predict here, another kind of hot take is another double down pick where Colston Loveland goes number 15 overall to the Falcons, where they either team him up with Kyle Pitts or possibly even move on from Kyle Pitts, because Kyle Pitts has been somewhat of a disappointment. He's, had some big games, some big moments, but he hasn't been that consistent contributor and producer like a top, was he a top 10 pick?
He was 8, I believe.
He was 8, yeah. So I knew he was at least top 10. So you want more production from those top 10 picks than he has, because he's just had games where he's disappeared, and you can't really have that. And I think because of that, they move on from Kyle Pitts and they select Colston Loveland and surprise everyone.
I think he might have been 4, actually.
Oh, yeah. Now that you say that, I think he was 4.
He was the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, Bijan was 8. Bijan was 8.
Crazy.
Yeah.
He went that high. Absolutely insane.
And you need more. You can't have games where you disappear. Not anymore. Rookie year, sophomore year, but he's got the contract extension and all that. He should be.
Exactly. You're at the point where you need to produce more. And, sometimes it's a cutthroat league and it's a cutthroat world in general. Sometimes the way to get a guy to produce more is light a fire under his ass. I mean, Kyle Pitts knows there's no one behind him right now. Of course, he should just perform better regardless. I'm not saying that's an excuse, but he knows he's safe right now because no one's going to come up. No one's going to take his job away from him right now. You sit him down and you say, guess what? Someone's going to take your job away if you don't get it together. You're going to get less snaps. Colston Loveland's going to get more snaps. Sometimes that's exactly what somebody needs. I don't think that this is their biggest need right now, but I think it's something that could definitely fire up their offense and would be huge for a guy like Michael Penix, who is really accurate both on the sidelines and in the middle of the field. Mostly on the sidelines, though, to get these 2 big body, fast tight ends like this, who are great with running those out routes and kind of outrunning seam routes. That would be so cool for him and really helpful for his development process. So not the pick I make that you'll see in a little bit, but I don't think it's a bad pick at all.
No, it's one of the few teams, where we said before, one of the few teams that actually makes sense for it. So, and then moving on, a team that doesn't make sense, that doesn't do this often, the host team, the Green Bay Packers, make the only trade in my mock draft. And it's a trade I tried to do in the first live mock draft. And this one finally succeeded because I had to do 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I kind of figured out for the Pro Football and Sports Network drafts. The way to do it is whoever is moving up just has to give out a king's ransom. They just have to give out everything. That's how you get the draft trade to work. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that's what I did.
Funny.
I don't see that happening. I see that, if anything, Jari Alexander being included in that trade, which makes up for one of those picks.
Yep.
So that was kind of my thought process in it. But that's what got it to work. And they moved up and they drafted Toria McMillan, the big wide receiver out of Arizona. And I think that regardless of whether they move up, I think this is the year that they take a wide receiver. I just figure if I say it every year, like when the 16 beat the 1, if I say it every year, eventually it's going to happen, and I'm going to look right.
I usually subscribe to the same thought process, but I've just given up. It just doesn't happen. They take a tackle. They take an edge rusher, usually somebody out of Georgia. It seems to be how it goes. I just don't see it happening. I think it's a really good idea for them to do it. I mean, you guys are right on the edge of greatness with that offense, and there's no better way than to get somebody who just plays so well above the rim. Somebody that when you're going down, when you're not looking good, when the offense isn't clicking, you can just say, screw offensive play call. I'm going to throw this ball really high up in the air, and he's going to go catch a touchdown. There's no better way to fire up your offense than with something like that. Just absolutely topping over a corner and getting a touchdown catch. So I do like the pick, but I've given up on it happening pretty much. That's the only reason I don't like it.
It's going to happen one of these years. It has to happen since 2002, where, ironically, they traded up with the Seahawks.
Oh,
so
interesting.
We'll see.
You know, we love history repeating itself.
We'll see how accurate I am in this crazy kind of mock draft. I know I'm probably going to swing and miss on my first round pick or first overall pick, but I feel like some of these others I might hit on.
Yeah, sometimes I'll talk about this more in my draft too, but just to kind of validate what Callan just said. So a lot of how we draft these is like what we think will happen predictive wise, but sometimes it's so fun to just throw a pick in there that you think should happen. Just kind of like a dream matchup that you really like. I have one or two in my draft that I'll talk about more, but Abdul Carter is kind of Callan's let me see it happen. I want to see it happen. But no, I overall really like your mock draft. There's definitely a couple reaches, a couple of crazy things, but real life has a couple of reaches and a couple of crazy things every year. So that's not too far off the wall. A couple of things are the only other two things that I really wanted to talk about are two picks in a row, ironically, with 26 and 27. Jalen Milroe to the Rams and Jahadi Brown to the Baltimore Ravens. And I like these ones I dislike one and like the other one for opposite reasons. Jalen Milroe is just way too much of a reach for me. I think it's not very likely, but it's definitely likely the Rams do end up going quarterback. But I think it's something a little more fitting to McVay and his system, something more Matt Stafford-like. My pick is, of course, Jackson Dart, as we kind of saw in the live mock last time around. But Jalen Milroe just is way too much of a jump for me. And then I wanted to point out Jahadi Barron for the exact opposite reason. I think that this is a dream scenario for the Baltimore Ravens if he actually falls all the way to 27 for them. And I don't see how you do anything but sprint up to the podium with that pick if he actually is still there at 27. He's one of my favorite players in the draft, and he's been definitely falling here as of late. So it seems like somebody might get a steal here later in the draft. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition.
And, I went Milroe because of the little draft attendees information that I have of Jackson Dart actually originally accepting the invitation and now actually pulling out and going home for the draft. He will not be in Green Bay now, and Jalen Milroe will be in Green Bay. So I just think that, they like those guys that actually attend it. Maybe the NFL sets one up. The Rams do a favor for the NFL. It happens sometimes. These inside deals, they happen. And I think this is where one happens.
And one thing that the Rams do a lot is a draft physical gifts and develop them into football players. And they do really well with that a lot of the times. I mean, guys like Puka Nacua is someone they did it with. Cooper Kupp, maybe not as much, maybe almost on the other side of things, but Tutu Atwell, they do it a ton with receivers and defensive players like their defensive tackle. I'm totally blanking on his name. Kobe Turner in the defensive tackle position. He's another guy that they do that with. So maybe that's what they kind of go for here. They saw the 40 that he had. They saw the physical traits that he has. They're like, hey, we can turn this guy into a football player. So we'll have to see how that goes exactly.
They love those 40 times, those coaches.
The coaches just go crazy for those. The scouts all have their little stopwatches, and they all talk to each other and look at the number. It's always so funny when it happens. But now flipping from one draft to the other and moving over to my draft now, which will be on screen now. As of course you see, starting off with number 1, which is always the big one. I kind of go with a little bit more of the masses with this one. I do have Cam Ward going number 1 overall to the Titans and Brian Callahan getting his new guy there in Tennessee. But then I do have Abdul Carter being a top 2 pick still. and going to the Browns there second. And then my kind of big shocker, or first shocker, I should say, in this draft is I actually have none other than the Las Vegas Raiders moving up. The only thing that makes this so unlikely is that they just don't really have the draft capital to jump up 3 spots, especially in the top 10. But nonetheless, I just love this pick for them. 2 of their biggest positions of need right now, outside of maybe running back, are wide receiver and corner. So why not get your guy that's both? Get your athlete, get the unicorn, take the risk on him, because it just, in a way, it doubles your odds to take Travis Hunter of hitting, because maybe fizzles out as a corner and hits it as a receiver. Maybe fizzles out as a receiver and hits it as a corner. Or maybe you really hit the jackpot and he truly can do both and sustain an 18-week NFL season and stay healthy at both positions. So I don't think that happens. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that happens. But like I said, with it doubling the odds, and maybe he hits it at corner, maybe he hits it at receiver, and you're in Vegas. And what do you do other in Vegas than gamble? I mean, it's so perfect. He's such a jersey seller, and that's what Las Vegas loves, their jersey sellers and kind of their big name guys like that. That's why for so many years they just took the Combine Warriors and the guys who kind of shot up with their 40 times, XYZ, bench press, things like that. So I think this is so fitting for the Raiders. Do they have the draft capital and the want to do it is a different question. Should they do it? Could they do it? Yeah, they could take the home run swing at it, no doubt about it. And then, of course, on the flip side of that trade is the Giants dropping down to that 6th position and still getting their quarterback and going with Shedeur Sanders. You pick up some good draft capital. You still get a guy that there was a chance you took at 3 regardless, but you get him down at 6. I talked about it during one of our live mock drafts that I think either of the New York positions are kind of the ideal place for Sanders to go right now, because he can do so well under the shining lights on the cameras. I think that's so good, and I actually really, really like this trade, even more than I thought while I was making it.
Yeah, it's kind of a surprising trade. You get both Colorado players involved in this trade, so you get the big 2 out of Colorado. Shedeur Sanders going in front of the Jets, where I had Shedeur Sanders going to the Jets, so that might be a little surprise move, and the Giants might slip that or steal that from the Jets and right in front of them. Travis Hunter going 3, I like. Going to the Raiders, that's the surprising part. I don't know. I don't know if, because you said they don't really have the draft capital and they really like Ashton Gennetti. I don't know if they give up on Gennetti, but we'll see.
Yeah, I still struggle to see Gennetti as an inside of the top 10 guy. Sometimes in my head, I even think he should be outside of top 10. So I'm not going to point on it or talk about it. So I'll kind of point it out that he does go exactly at 10 to the Bears in my mock draft. And with Ben Johnson taking over as head coach there, I love that pick because, of course, Ben Johnson loves his running back. So I think that's really good for the Bears. But yeah, I don't think that the Raiders need him, and I don't see him as a top 6 pick or 6 overall pick. But that's just because I think our running backs are a dime a dozen. That's nothing against Ashton Genty specifically. But another big thing that I really wanted to point out was actually just in front of that 6 overall pick, with the Jacksonville Jaguars in their 5th overall pick, not going with the consensus Mason Graham, but instead going with tight end out of Penn State, Tyler Warren. Now, I will be honest, this was not my own thought process. I stole this from a different mock draft I saw. I think it was Mel Kiper, but I can't remember for sure. But the way he explained it and just the idea of this overall, I absolutely love. This is one that I don't think will happen. I think it's more likely Mason Graham gets picked, but it's one I think should happen, surely because of Liam Cohen being their new head coach. Liam Cohen comes from the offensive coordinator of the Buccaneers over to Jacksonville to become their head coach. And if you look at what Liam Cohen did with Cade Otton in the tight end in that offense there in Tampa Bay, it was so impressive. It was really good because I like Cade Otton, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that he's a premier tight end in the league. And the way Liam Cohen used him and included him in that offense kind of made him seem like an upper echelon tight end in the league at some point. So if you go and you get a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, who had a little bit of a down season last year, and you just get him this absolute safety blanket and confidence builder of a pass catcher like Tyler Warren is, and then you force multiply that with a head coach like Liam Cohen, who's so good at using a tight end, especially a tight end as talented as Tyler Lawrence is panning out to be. This is just kind of another match made in heaven for me, which is ironic to say considering I said Mason Graham is a match made in heaven for them. So Tyler Warren or Mason Graham, probably both of them are going to be there. And if they pick one of those guys, the Jacksonville Jaguars just don't miss. I think them at that 5th overall position is going to be one of the most valuable picks in this entire draft, no matter which way they go.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a reach, I think, but it's a case of go get your guy if that's the guy you want to get. So I agree with your reasoning. It does make a lot of sense with Liam Cohen being the head coach there in Jacksonville now. So I didn't consider that, but if they do get Tyler Warren or Mason Graham, they're going to get one hell of a player.
Yeah, certainly. Yep. And then moving on down the list from one trade to another. Well, actually, before we quite get there, I just want to say how much I like the Jalen Walker pick to the Panthers. The two biggest thing that the Panthers need right now are an inside linebacker and an edge rusher. So you get a guy like Jalen Walker, who's an athletic freak and has been doing it so well at Georgia for so long and can do both. I mean, literally on the same play, can do both sometimes. I really like that pick to them just kind of as a way to jumpstart that defense. But moving on to what I was actually going to talk about with the second trade I make, and second trade within the top 10, I actually have the San Francisco 49ers jumping up and grabbing Mason Graham as a dropper at 9th overall. Now, I don't think that they're jumping the Bears for any specific thing. Maybe the Bears go Mason Graham, but more than anything, they're jumping up and getting him before anybody else can. Because they just, sometimes when a guy drops like that, you just want to go get him. Because you're like, somebody else is going to go get him. We want this guy. He's obtainable now all of a sudden because he fell this close to us. So they just jump up a few spots and make sure that they can secure it in and get their guy. So that's kind of why I did that one there. And they have no defensive tackle right now, and they're used to having some of the better defensive tackles in the league and are really good at drafting and developing those defensive tackles. So you get a guy that already has maybe not the highest ceiling, but already has such a high floor. He's going to be an instant impact, and you can develop him up to make sure he reaches that ceiling. I love that for the 49ers. And then I have the little bit of a shocker here and probably another reach. The Saints move back 2 picks and get some extra draft capital, but do still end up going quarterback with Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss. Now, of course, there was just some reports recently that Derek Carr is having some health issues that might keep him out for at least the start, if not most to all of next season. So yes, you do have Spencer Radley on your roster, which is a rookie last year. He's still developing. He was really good at Oklahoma and then had a bad falling out with them and falling in general and had a meh year in South Carolina. So maybe you can resurrect him somehow, but it just doesn't really look like he's on an upslope in career. It looks like he's much more on a downslope. So you get another guy, you kind of get some competition in there, and maybe Jackson Dart's ready to start week 1. Maybe you let Radler run it. Maybe Derek Carr's ready to start week 1. But now you have another guy to throw in that mix. You have another possible future on your roster.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising to me that Jackson Dart goes so high. I actually had him falling out of my first round in my mock draft. So to see the difference of him going 11th overall comparatively to falling out, that just shows kind of the parity and the wild cardness of where he could go. Yep. It can be anywhere from that stretch of land there. So to see him go 11 to the Saints, I think does make sense in that sense, in the sense of they do need the quarterback, especially with the Derek Carr injury now coming out lately. And then Mason Graham falling to the 49ers, and talk about the rich getting richer, because the 49ers just dominate with those defensive linemen, and they get one of the top ones in the NFL draft and possibly the top defensive prospect.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this trade works out really well for both of them. And it's so funny this year because it's kind of common that this happens, but I feel like this year is much more than it usually is. There's always like that clear-cut top guy, and Cam Ward's kind of in that top quarterback this year. But there has been more kind of division and arguments over who the number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like you can keep going down the list on who the quarterbacks is and where they're going to get drafted, where exactly they fall ranking-wise against each other, where their best fits are. There's just so many different opinions on that this year. So exactly, a guy that fell out of your first round is borderline top 10 in mine, and a guy that is practically a late round 3, day 3 guy for me, and Jalen Milroe is a first round guy in yours. So it's just, like you said, it so well shows the parity of quarterbacks this year. But then, yeah, another thing to kind of branch off of that in the Mason Graham falling thing is there's a couple of guys in my draft who fell that I really wanted to point out and I really like. Those guys being, of course, Mason Graham to start. And then if you look at 18 there with Will Johnson, maybe the Seahawks don't really need a corner right now. But when you have a guy like Will Johnson fall into your lap and you don't even have to move up, you don't have to do anything to get him, he's going to pair so well with Tariq Woolen. And they've shown before that they're very willing to not take reaches, but they're willing to go get young corners to improve that secondary. Did it with Tariq Woolen in the second round, went and got Devin Witherspoon 5th overall last year to kind of be that slot guy. Now you get your other outside guy with Will Johnson as a steal. You don't have to do anything but sit there and wait for him. And then just 2 picks later with another corner in Jahadi Barron falling to 20 in the Broncos. The Broncos are sitting there. The top 2 running backs in Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty are both gone. So you get a guy that can go across from Pat Surtain, or maybe you move Riley Moss outside and move Jahadi Barron in the middle, or maybe you just pick what body type you like the most and flip Riley Moss and Jahadi Barron back and forth on who's inside and outside across from Pat Surtain, because they can both have that versatility to do that. So it's just something very fun that the Broncos could do, especially with Jahadi Barron falling to them.
Yeah, it is kind of both are steals, if you would say, because they both are highly rated cornerbacks in this draft. It's funny that they're both their cornerbacks to the Seahawks and Denver Broncos, respectively. But I do think that Will Johnson will be the better player overall in this, and I think that he maybe should go higher, because I think I had him, if I checked, at 8 to Carolina. So he's always been one of the top draft prospects since last year, and I think that he continues to end up being one of the top draft prospects, even whether he falls to the 18 or 8.
Yeah, certainly. And then the last kind of big thing that I really wanted to point out was, of course, a final trade I made, which is the Arizona Cardinals down there at the bottom of the screen at 22, actually still getting their 16th overall pick, but jumping back into the first round and being the only team with 2 first-round picks this year and snagging Tet McMillan and taking the big-bodied receiver out of Arizona right in front of the Packers, who, if they can get him at 23, probably would take him. So the Cardinals see that. They see their opportunity. They jump in there. I'm totally blanking on the team at 22 now. The Chargers. Yeah, so that's the Chargers just didn't really have anybody left on the board that was overly valuable to them in my head right now.
The big 2 tight ends are gone.
Big 2 tight ends are gone. Most of the top defensive tackles are gone. Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss actually falls out of my first round. I think that's who Callan had him taking.
That's who I had him going here.
So the Cardinals take the opportunity. They don't have to give up quite as much capital as you would need to jump that many spots and get back in the first round and get 2 big-time first-round picks, 2 big-bodied first-round picks too.
Yeah, it'd be very disappointing for the Packers if this happened again, because it happened with Cooper DeJean last year to the Eagles in the second round. But if this happened in the first round, then, I mean, Green Bay should have traded up to go get their guy like I have them doing in mind. But I think that Tet McMillan does end up being one of the first-round picks in the NFL this year, and I think that he's going to end up being a hell of a player no matter where he goes.
Yeah, certainly. And then just to kind of finish things out on my end, I mean, 23 through 32, that last column on the right side, I just love all of those picks. I felt so good with the way my mock draft ended. I think that these all could happen and should happen. They're a nice mix of all of them. The Packers taking a little bit of risk on a guy like Revel, who showed huge upside but came out with an injury. Malachi Starks is my draft crush for the Vikings. It's exactly who I want them to get, and they do here. Donovan Jackson is a guy who played offensive guard and was one of the top offensive guards, maybe behind Tyler Booker, the entire season. And then during the playoffs, with the injury to Josh Simmons at Ohio State, they actually kicked him out to tackle, and he went against some of the best edge rushers in the college football season last year and absolutely dominated at left tackle. So that offensive guard to left tackle versatility is so perfect for what the Texans need right now with that barren offensive line. Jahadi Campbell's a steal. Tyler Booker's a steal. James Pierce is a huge upside player. Nick Emwari is a steal. I like Trey Amos. And then both 31 and 32, Kenneth Grant and Gray Zabel, are my two guys that I think should be first-round guys who are going to be later. A lot of people think they will fall out of the first round. I think Callan did have them. You had Gray Zabel, but not Kenneth Grant.
Yep.
But they're both guys that I think could and should fall in the first round, so I snuck them in at the end there because the Chiefs are going to need defensive tackle. They're planning ahead on their defensive tackle, and the Philadelphia Eagles are going to need offensive guard and always draft their offensive linemen ahead. So they do the same thing there with Gray Zabel.
Yeah, Gray Zabel, he's going to be a nice player. North Dakota State, they're just able to kick out offensive linemen lately. I think the Chiefs go defensive tackle no matter what. It just is who. I've seen Walter Nolan. I've seen Kenneth Grant. I've seen Tyreek Williams. So it's just whichever one is available that they like. It's just figuring out which one they like. I do like Siobhan Ravalli. He's one of my favorite players in the draft this year, so I wouldn't be too butthurt if he ended up falling to the Packers with Ted McMillan getting stolen in front of him. And I think Donovan Jackson is going to end up being a steal in this draft because of that versatility.
Yeah, certainly. I did Ravel mostly for you. Just for you, I did Ravel. But yeah, I like Kenneth Grant to the Chiefs because I agree. I think the Chiefs go defensive tackle regardless. It's just who's available, who do they want at that point. But just with how well Kenneth Grant can rush the passer and the way that Chris Jones has been able to disrupt the passing game for such a long time now, I think he's just such a good replacement and such a fitting replacement for Chris Jones to mentor Kenneth Grant. So that's kind of why I slotted him in there, but it really could be any of them. That one's definitely a toss-up. But that was my mock draft and Callan's mock draft, our final mock drafts for the 2025 NFL Draft. Let us know in the comment what you guys think, what you think could happen, should happen, will happen. However you want to say it, let us know what you guys think, because, I mean, that's the point of a mock draft, is to stir up debates, to have some fun, to think of hypotheticals. So
get people talking.
Exactly, get people talking. So thank you all so much for watching this episode and all your support throughout the entire draft process. I say it all the time because it's nothing but the truth. It's my favorite time of the year. So sad to see it end, but very happy that it happened. So really appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching this episode. And until next time, don't forget
to eat the W.